And welcome to CFA UK's Wednesday webinar at 1. My name is Gerhard Sogel. We're delighted to welcome Victoria McLean back to our studios today to share her insights on how to write a winning CV. Having reviewed more than 50,000 CVs, Victoria will guide us on how to best build our own CV and answer the many burning questions we might have. Victoria established City CV in 2008 following a successful career that included steering recruitment at Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch. City CV works with clients across the globe, including UK, US, Asia, Australasia, Europe, and the Middle East, as well as top international business schools. City CV regularly wins major international industry awards, including Best Executive Resume, Best Finance Resume, Best International Resume, and Best New Graduate Resume and Career Directors International Toast of the Resume Industry. And I have just learned that Victoria will be presenting at CFA Institute's annual conference. If you're going, look out for the session. If you haven't booked yet, that's another reason to book. The presentation will take about 30 minutes, followed by Q&A. Please participate in the Q&A session using the appropriate box on your screens, as it is not every day we have Victoria here with us. Just before we start, a quick question, Victoria. Is a resume the same as a CV?
It really depends on which part of the world that you're in. In the US, we tend to call it a resume. In the UK, most of Europe, it's a CV. Actually, they're really the same thing. They're interchangeable. The style that we write in a two-page CV is very, very similar to the global resume. So pretty much the same.
Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. Lovely to talk with you all today. Just a little bit about who I am before I get going. As Gerhard said, I'm a career expert. I'm an award-winning CV writer. I'm a career coach. Essentially, what myself and my team do is develop cutting-edge marketing material, whether that's an interview pitch or a CV or an online LinkedIn profile. It's anything which is going to enhance your ability to obtain the best roles and the best salary. And frequently, it's a role that you probably wouldn't have had the chance to secure otherwise. Previously, I was a headhunter, I was a recruitment consultant before I joined Goldman's and then Merrill's. And it was while I was at Merrill's that I recognized the need to support individuals in their career. And that's when City CV was born. Essentially, I look at recruitment from all angles. My entire career has been committed to truly understanding what it is that employers look for and ensuring that individuals fulfill their career goals. And that's through introducing marketing principles into their job search, which is a technique I'm going to go through with you today. It's what it's all about, really. It's all about marketing. Very briefly, we're a CV writing interview coaching firm, 1,000 clients alone last year. I'm right across the world at every level you can think of. But to me, the important thing isn't what you do. It's not the function. It's not the sector. It's getting the strategy right to secure your target role that's really important. Just a few of our successes on screen there. But really importantly, our clients aren't illiterate. They're not stupid. They just don't want to risk missing out. And they tend to be really focused individuals who want to achieve their career goals and understand the value of having some expert help. So as I say, it's all about the very best marketing collateral for your target role. So how does that work? We know that the recruitment industry, that the UK job market, the international job market, is more competitive than it's ever been. And it's never been more important to have a CV that's going to beat your competition. You can see a box there on the screen, I think. I mean, how do you feel about your CV at the moment? Do you feel that your CV presents you at your best? Maybe you can let me know in the Q&A box. How do you feel about your CV? Does it present you at your best? What I want to do today is...
Can we try the Q&A box, please? Can you hear us?
Oh, great. That's great. I can see them all coming through. Fab. Thank you. So that's great to see that you can hear us, and it's great to see your comments on your CV. I mean, whether you think it's presenting you at your best or not, I want to help each of you today improve your CV so it's generating more interviews And over the next 30 minutes, really, I want to run through a framework that will help you stand out in what's become a very crowded market. So 11 very, very practical tips that you can immediately apply to your CV to open doors and secure the job that you deserve. And there's a lot to get through, so have your pens at the ready, please, to make notes, but you'll also be sent out a recording following this session. Okay, so my first tip today is that it's all about marketing. CVs have changed a huge amount over the last few years. It used to be a list of job descriptions, responsibilities, and that's what I see on most CVs. But actually, it needs to be reframed as a marketing document. It's just one part of your marketing collateral, which is your CV, your LinkedIn, your cover letter, maybe a bio, maybe your interview. You're a product. Think about yourself as a product. You're in a really competitive marketplace. Your future employer, or maybe a promotion, that hirer is the buyer. So your CV has to demonstrate why they should buy you, and what sets you apart from all the other products, all the other people in the market. So think of your CV not as a chronology, but really as not a list of your experience, but as a business case that demonstrates clearly how you meet the employer's needs and why they should hire you. Does your CV tell you, or tell your future employer, if you're any good? Does it show how you add value? Because a list of your job spec doesn't really tell them that at all. So one of the ways we add value is by helping you understand what you've got to offer, how you can market yourself on paper, in person, and of course, online. I'm often asked, how long should my CV be? No more than 2 pages, please. If you're in hedge funds, private equity, potentially 1 page will do. Maybe you can have a 1-pager with an appendix with your key transactions and deals, but don't go over 2 pages. And ideally, you should have more than one version. So if you're applying for a couple of different roles, a couple of different functions, have more than one version of your CV, because everybody that's hiring, they've got a problem that needs solving, or they've got a gap that needs filling, and you need to show you're the perfect solution to that problem. And a generic CV that covers all your bases won't do that. So the more CVs you can have, the more targeted, the better. And the reason this is so important is because recruiters will reject or take you forward on the basis of your CV. If they like what they see, they're going to jump on LinkedIn immediately and check you out. Or it works the other way. They find you on LinkedIn first because you've got a great profile. And if they like what they see, they'll contact you for your CV. So your LinkedIn and your CV have to go hand in hand. It's all about the marketing. My second tip is how to beat the CV robots, the resume robots. I'm hoping that you've heard of an applicant tracking system. I'm guessing that many of you haven't, but the majority of companies, 99.9% of recruitment agencies, now use some form of applicant tracking system. This is the candidate database, the searchable database, and they use these for candidates from the most junior to the most senior. It's completely transformed recruitment. It's completely transformed the screening process. So the ATS tends to do the first screen for a role. Before your CV gets in front of a human, it's got to get past the computer sniff test. But secondly, it works as a searchable database for the recruiter to use. So let's say that they're looking for a research analyst with buy-side experience, maybe established corporate relationships in the pharma space, particular expertise in VBA and financial modeling, maybe some leadership experience as well. These are the kinds of keywords that the recruiter will type in, either when they're setting up the job and posting it online, maybe on eFinancial Careers or City Jobs or another job site, or on their own website or on their company website, or it's if they jump onto their database to search for the ideal candidate. What happens is you get a score, your CV is scored in the applicant tracking system. You would need to be getting a good score, maybe 75, 80, 85% to get through in order for a real human being to actually see your CV. And bear in mind that an applicant tracking system, maybe the older ones, can't read data if it's in a text box or a table, or if there's a border on the page, or if it's in a PDF. So think about the format of your CV, or you won't get in front of a human. So it's terrifying, really, how the ATS has transformed the sector, bearing in mind that more than 80% of jobs that you see online are built within an ATS. Really mind-blowing. So how do you beat the bots? One of the ways is using keywords. Have any of you, let me know in the answer box, have any of you undertaken keyword research when you were writing your CV? Just watching those answers come through. Oh, so it's a real mix by the looks of things. Okay, it's a big part of what we do as CV writers. It's about taking the time to understand the language that recruiters are likely to be seeing, and ensuring that the words are in the right place in the CV as well. It's something that I've perfected over the last decade or so. But what's really important is that the words aren't just bland platitudes that you might find in any job spec. We're looking for specific areas of knowledge, specific skills which you have and that are relevant, of course, to your target role. You can see on screen there a bit of a mix. On the left, the skills that need to be deeper as they are on the right. But you've got to get this right or you're not going to get out of cyberspace. So think about job titles, think about your technical skills, think about your knowledge. What might a recruiter be looking for? This is SEO, search engine optimization, which I do as having a website. I employ a professional SEO firm to help me get the right keywords. It's the same with your CV. And think about different ways of saying the same thing. You can see that risk here on the left isn't enough. We want risk control, risk management, risk reduction, risk register. So think of lots of ways that you can really deepen this and get it right so that you don't miss out on the jobs. What's really important as well is that you can create this list of keywords, but that anything you refer to, maybe if you have an expertise section, that you back it up with real evidence in the body of your CV, because otherwise it's just a list of words. Anyone can pull up a list of words. You've got to bring them into the body of the content of your CV for this to be really effective. My third tip is that you prepare your pitch. And what I mean by that is before you even get going, think properly about what it is that you're selling. We know your CV's got to be precise and it's got to be well constructed to get past the people and the computers. But it's complicated. And if you're doing this yourself, don't get lost in the subjectivity. Be really objective, be really strategic, and give yourself time. We normally spend 8 to 10 hours on one CV, and we do it all the time. So give yourself the time to do this properly. And before you put pen to paper to start making changes, prepare a business case. Think, why are they hiring me? What commercial output am I going to deliver? How are they going to get their return on their investment? Is it about clients? Is it about revenue? Is it about cost? What am I going to be delivering? And then think, okay, what expertise do I have? What do I have that will enable me to deliver the output, the results that they need? And brainstorm and think about hard evidence to back this up. And finally, as part of your pitch, what's your unique selling point? What differentiates you and sets you apart from your competition? And this is a process that we go through with all of our clients before we even start writing with them. So we can be really clear on our pitch, on our strategy, and how we're going to sell them best. So think this hard, think through it, talk it through with a third party, and really think about your uniqueness, your differentiator. Then you can start writing. And the next tip that I have is about getting the headline right. So this is about the business case at the top of your CV, because we know that the reader might not get further than this before they make that read or reject decision. So what you're trying to do in your headline and your executive summary is say all the very best bits of you, where you add value, your key skills, your unique selling point. It's about what sets you apart. So under your name and your contact details, you probably just need the city and your postcode. You don't need your full address at this point. Don't forget the basics though, of course. The next thing is to have a title at the top of your CV. And what I'm thinking about here is a job title, preferably the target job title, if possible. And if you performed this role in the past, in your current job or your last job, then title it that way. VP Corporate Finance, Equity Research Analyst, Program Manager. If you've not had the job title before, then maybe application for, candidate for can work just as well. But the reason title works is that firstly, it gets all the keywords out there immediately. But secondly, it's a brilliant way of aligning you with your target role in the mind of the recruiter. So immediately they can see that's what you are. This is about presence, it's about impact, immediate impact, and of course, it's about the keywords. So get the headline right to start with. Then my next tip is to really start with a bang, and I'm talking about the executive summary here. After your job title, you have your short intro paragraph, maybe 3 or 4 bullet points. And it can be really hard to write this. I normally write this at the end rather than the beginning. So I write the CV first and then I go back up to write that intro. What you're trying to do here is sum up all the various best bits of you, be really relevant to your target, maybe include your years of experience. You can see my bad example there. Hopefully you can see why that's a bad example. It just doesn't really tell me anything about the candidate. The good intro, same person, just written in a very different way. It's impressive. It packs a huge amount of punch into just one section, one sentence, sorry. It tells me what they bring to the role. Really, that exceptional network of contacts. It's really impactful. So this is how I would start an executive summary and then follow that with maybe 3 bullet points that really focus on what you deliver and how you can sum yourself up in relation to that target role. My next tip is about context. It's about providing context throughout your professional experience. So this section, professional experience, is where your future employer is going to probably make their decision on whether you're the right person, the right fit, whether you can deliver what they need. So to get started on that, and this may sound simple, but it's amazing how many people get this wrong. Clearly state the company name. You need a keyword-rich job title, and the dates that you work there should be on the right because that's where the computer is looking for the dates, so they need to be on the right of the page. The only reason anyone's going to hire you, it's not about your skills really, it's because of the commercial impact you're going to have on their bottom line. So demonstrate that you can and that you have delivered in the past. It's hard because it's subjective. You've really got to cut through the wood here to think about what you should delete and what you should leave in. The key is to be objective and always think about your target the whole time. So the way that we would write is we would have a role overview, which is a short paragraph, an introduction to each role, and its function is to tell a story about the job environment, the arc of your progression. What happened when you got there, and how did that change over the period you were there, and what was your remit, what you actually hired to do? And if you can explain what you were hired to do, then you can show how you achieved that and reflect on the purpose of your role. Most CVs that I see contain this long list of responsibilities, responsible for. Actually, my worst ever CV phrase is responsible for, or responsibilities include. You'll never see that on one of our CVs. It just is really boring. So avoid lists and frame what you were actually brought on board to do and high level what you did. So you've got my bad example there. Again, it doesn't really tell me anything. What we're looking for is a bit of context. How big were the projects? What kind of regions? What key clients? Give me a story really in terms of the context of the role, the size of the team. This is going to help me understand what it is that you really did. And again, you can see these examples here. Same story told in a very different way. But the key is don't write everything down. Just pick the good stuff and only use what's relevant. Underlined in red there, you can see what I call the hooks. So the idea is we want to hook the reader in straight away. A little bit unrealistic, possibly to have 6 major hooks in one short intro, but if you can see that, then brilliant. But definitely have at least 1 or 2 hooks in there to really get the reader excited by you and what you can deliver. So that's the role overview. And just to jump back up, the company overview is really about providing scope and context. So if you're working for an organization that perhaps isn't that well known, let people know what they do, what their turnover is, assets under management, the regions covered, the type of investments. If you're working for a big brand like Goldman's or Merrill's or HSBC that everybody knows, you don't need to include the company overview. But if it's a small business, then I probably would. My next tip is to show, don't tell. So once you've nailed that introductory paragraph, the role overview, follow it with a handful of bullet points that tell the best stories about how you've added value, your achievements, your successes, what did you achieve and how did you do it? And don't worry if you can't quantify, you can't always quantify, but do describe the impact. So when we're working with our private clients one-to-one, the kind of things that we would ask you to come up with these bullet points are, what challenges have you faced and overcome? What efficiencies have you created? What projects, what transactions, what successes, what client wins, impact that you had on P&L, impact that you had on revenue, impact you had on cost or efficiency. The list goes on, but if you ask yourself these questions, you can really beef up these bullet points. The bullet points aren't about the job. That's what's important. They can't be about the job. The bullet points are about you and your value add and the impact that you've had. So this is the kind of thing that I see on CVs all the time under achievements. To me, that's not really an achievement. That's a responsibility. It's the kind of thing that maybe any FX salesperson would do. That's expected. Doesn't have an outcome, doesn't have an impact. The good achievement, again, the same story told in a different way, is exactly what we're looking for. Huge amount of punch in one sentence, really clear outcomes. It's what you need to be doing with every bullet point. You need a really clear outcome on every bullet. And that way the recruiter can see what you can do for them or for their clients. So look at the bullet points on your CV. Are they really achievements? And if they're not, they really need to spend time changing them. Okay, my next tip is keep it lean and clean. And I'm thinking about the education here. Once your career's progressed, the reader cares much less about your education, much more about your experience. So as you move on in your career, you can reduce this section more and more. But my main tip is keep it really simple, only include impressive grades. And if you've got a 2.2 or below, then probably don't mention it. You only need the date of graduation. So you can see my bad and my good example here. Include modules if it's very recent or very relevant, but otherwise just a simple line, as you can see there, is all that's required. And also, if you think about your professional development, keep it relevant. Nobody cares if you did a half-day course on team working maybe 5 years ago. But if it's a certification, then it needs to be included, absolutely. The CFA candidate, ensure you use the right language for that on your CV. There's quite strict rules around that, I know. But these kind of courses that you can see on screen, you don't need them on your CV. Keep it lean and clean, and lots of white space. My next tip is what I call the icing on the cake. So this is about things that you can add to your CV just to give it the edge. If you've had a career break, I'd mention it here in an additional information section, by the way, any interesting activities you've done on that break. But whether you've had a career break or not, start to think about what you've done that can differentiate you and demonstrate the competencies that we know that your audience is looking for. Triathlon, great example of stamina, energy, focus. Maybe you can show your risk appetite or lack of it through through poker and some successes that you've had. So think about what you do and what you enjoy that's got a bit of depth, nothing too passive like just going to the movies, but things that have got depth that you can include, and they can be a great differentiator. I worked with somebody who had been a Bollywood dancer. She'd performed in front of 5,000 people. I loved it. Loved having that on her CV. It's a great icebreaker, great thing to talk about at interview as well. And at the end of interview, oh, remember the one we met who was a Bollywood dancer? You know, it gives them something to think about and to talk about. There's my cake, my icing on the cake. The other thing to mention, particularly if you're early in your finance career, is extracurricular activities that you enjoy that relate back to finance. If you've got a real portfolio or maybe a virtual portfolio, write about it. Let us know what the strategies are that you follow. Fundamental analysis, the ROI that you've achieved over the last 6 months or 12 months, the kind of assets that you're investing in. So that kind of information can show a passion for the financial services industry that may be lost in the body of your CV if you don't have much experience. So think about what you can add to your CV. Maybe you can start to get involved in these things in order to add them to your CV, because that kind of thing can make a real difference. But beware, because you will need to talk about this at interview. So make sure that it's true and that you can really expand on that at interview. Okay, so you've got all the great content. Think now about the look and the feel. It's got to be super corporate, no typos. Make sure that you get somebody to proofread it for you again and again and again. Our other director is a professor of English, which has been invaluable for us from a quality perspective. But if you're doing it yourself, make sure you check it and get somebody else to check it. It's very hard to proof your own work. Keep it nice and simple and clean. Crazy designs can mess up the computer screening. No photos can mess up the computer screening again. And just be consistent throughout, really, in terms of your spacing and your margins and your justification. It's really important that you have a slick and professional finish. If you can't produce a good CV, what are you going to produce in the world of work? Okay, so they're my main tips for today. I know I've whizzed through it, but I'm hoping you've got lots from that. I've got another question for you now. Have you learned something today? A tip, one little tip that you can apply to your own CV to improve it and help get you some interviews. Great. That's what we're hoping for.
Yes.
Lots of yeses. That's great. I mean, that's what today is all about. So my last tip really is to don't stress. Help is there if you need it. It's not just about having a CV. It's about a life-changing solution, really, because a new CV, getting this right is transformative. So it's worth investing time into it. Don't try and do this in an hour. As I say, it takes us 8 to 10 hours, and we do it all the time. So really put the time into it. You're looking for a CV that's going to get you the best job and the best salary. So this isn't about how good you are. I'm sure you're all brilliant. It's about how well you market yourself. So if you feel you need to give it an overhaul, give yourself time to do this. And if you want help, if you would like some help, then please get in touch with me for some help. Essentially, we're wordsmiths, we're writers, we're really good at writing. You'd have a 1.5 hour consultation with us on Skype or on the phone, and following that, we do everything. We completely rewrite your CV. You'll have it back in about a week to read through in Word. It'll be keyword rich, and we'll do any amendments, and then it's over to you, and you can start applying for those roles. And we do the same with LinkedIn, and we also can help you with interviews and career coaching. So do get in touch with me following today if you'd like to talk about that in more detail or like any help. And also, please do link in with me following this session and let me know that you've enjoyed it and it's been helpful. We're offering a discount to anyone that's been on the session today of 10%, which we can talk to you about on the phone or if you order online. So now I think it's time for questions.
Thank you.
From you.
Yes, we're, I think, full of questions. Do take a breath. Question from Elena. Could you explain, please, whether LinkedIn profile should be like extended CV, while CVs for a particular position should be brief?
Elena, what I would normally say, and certainly the way that LinkedIn like this and the way we write LinkedIn, is that we do write them in a different style. So the CV is a more formal document, generally written in the third person or quite ambiguous, and can contain more information because you don't have to be as discreet because it's not in the public domain. The LinkedIn tends to be written in a first person, much more engaging. We're looking for a bit of likability here. People engage with people that they like. So first person, give some personality away and be less discreet because you can't give this information out to the whole world, particularly around numbers. I think of LinkedIn as giving showing a little bit of ankle, but don't go above the knee. So you want to give them just enough to be excited and want to get in touch and give you a ring, but don't give them too much. So they really complement each other, but they don't repeat each other.
Thank you. Question from Alexis. By listing the date you graduated, You're effectively telling an employer your age and leave yourself open to age discrimination.
You're absolutely right. What I would suggest is if any of you are worried about age discrimination, don't include the date of any of your education. You can also take the date out of your LinkedIn. And what you can do is maybe go back 10 or 15 years with your career on your CV and then have a section beneath your professional experience called earlier career. And within that, compress the companies that you've worked for and the roles that you had there, but you don't need the dates. So that's something that we frequently do. No one's that interested in your earlier career, so you don't feel that your CV has to be a chronology of everything you've done. It's simply a marketing document, and that's all that it is.
Thank you. A question from Sen. Which section of the CV should suggest us to incorporate the icing on the cake activities? I usually leave it to the end.
That's right. So at the very end, I'd have a section called additional information. And then within that, you can bullet point your other achievements, external achievements. If you're more junior in your career, you might want to have a section within that or separately called financial acumen or financial extracurricular activities. And in that, you can include your blogging. And if you're blogging through, I don't know, Market Mogul, you might want to include a link to some of the blogs or your blog page. So you can have a financial additional information section in addition to your other additional information.
Just a quick question from Samuel. Did you say not to use PDF, only Word docs?
Ideally, don't use PDF. It depends. The more sophisticated applicant tracking systems can, of course, read content in a PDF. But some of the older ones don't, and some recruiters haven't invested in the latest technology. So if you have a PC and you can use Word, I would use Word. If you have a Mac, it's not a good idea to submit in Pages because most businesses use Word, so then you probably need to either use Word or a PDF.
Thank you. Any question from Hoi? Any tips for people looking to switch careers?
Hi, Hoi. What I would say is if you're looking for a new career, you need to think about two things. Firstly, the keywords in your target career and make sure that you include those as much as possible in your CV. So if you haven't been working in finance before, that's when that additional finance information can really come into its own because you can get the keywords in there. But secondly, thinking about the outcomes required by your target role and think about how you've got the transferable skills which will enable you to deliver what your future employer is looking for. So if it's about revenue, write about revenue and think about how you can deliver that and when you've delivered it in the past. But the key really is the keywords and getting those right, or you're just not going to get in front of a real human. The other thing to bear in mind is that you're 5 times more likely to get a job through networks than you are through a normal application, which is why LinkedIn is so important. You probably need to start going to networking events and reaching out to people in groups on LinkedIn. But LinkedIn's a whole different webinar.
Okay. I have a question for you. Particularly in your CV, I saw you sometimes mention clients and numbers, profit numbers or revenue numbers. Aren't you treading a thin line there?
It really depends on the NDA, the non-disclosure that you might have signed with your previous employer. One way of getting around that is by converting real figures into percentages. So rather than saying that you brought in $1 million, for example, if you can write about how the percentage increased from the previous year. So there are ways that you can be quite clever, but frequently people are able to include those kind of facts and figures and clients. Occasionally we have to be careful. We might say an oil and gas giant, global giant, rather than the name of the company.
Yes.
But you've just got to check out your NDA. If you can be clear and specific, that really enhances your CV. But like I say, LinkedIn, you've got to be more careful, definitely.
A practical one. Any best font or size?
Font, go for something that's really easy to read, like Calibri. Arial's a little boring, but it's very easy to read. The Times New Roman is more old-fashioned and it's hard to read. And probably don't go below, depending on the font, Calibri probably no less than 10.5. Arial, you can probably go down to 10. So I know on screen you can expand, but people will print out your CV for the interview, so it needs to be
Readable.
readable. Yeah. I've seen some that are tiny to try and squeeze everything else in.
A question from Cole. How important is the summary at the top of the CV? I've heard some people say that you should just start with your experience.
Hi, Cole. I would say it's important, but it needs to be really short. I've seen so many CVs where the whole of the first page is a summary and then skills, and you have to go on to page 2 in order to see what the person's been doing. And yet, the thing recruiters really want to know is where you've been working and what you did there. So maybe the first quarter of the first page can be a summary related to your target role and your expertise, and then straight onto your professional experience. If you're a grad, by the way, you only want a one-page CV. Never go over one page for a finance grad. And you probably haven't got room for a very long executive summary in that case.
Okay, a very interesting one here from Daniel. If in my early career I have worked in an industry completely unrelated to finance, can I take it off? Often I'm questioned about that.
It depends if there's anything relevant that you've done that can be related. Let's say particular projects you've been involved in, the fact that you learn how to build really strong client relationships, so maybe 1 or 2 bullet points. But if it was a long time ago, I wouldn't bother. I don't think it's relevant. The thing is, if there's a gap in a CV, people don't like to see that gap. So perhaps having an earlier career section would be the way to do it for you.
Thank you. A question from Naomi. Is the cover letter necessary every time?
If you are applying for a role through a recruiter, they're not going to read the cover letter. I would say 99% of the time they probably won't read it, so don't spend your time doing that. If you're applying for a role where they specifically ask for a covering letter, you must do a really good cover letter. Again, early career, the grad schemes in the banks, it's part of their application process. You need a full detailed page. We write them for our clients. They take a long time, but it's really, really important. But if you're further on in your career and you're going through an agency, don't waste your time. People are unlikely to read it. It is relevant if you're undertaking a career transition or you're moving to a different function. You need to explain why you're making that move. Then it's important.
If you have been at a company for 10 years, if the fund return for 10 years is unfavorable, how can you focus on the best number?
It's really, really difficult. I mean, I don't know about your own performance within the fund, so maybe if you can talk about your own performance, and that's not been too bad, that would be the way to do it. But we've had this with clients in the past. It's very difficult, depending on your role. If you're in a front office type of role, that's a really tricky one. I mean, perhaps I could talk to you about it offline because there are ways around it, but essentially it's a really difficult one. There's no definitive answer, really, I'm afraid. It needs to be about your own performance and think about the value add that you've had and the successes and the things you're proud of, rather than the fund as a whole.
Question from Alexi. Are there any keyword research tools or resources you recommend?
Alexia, I would suggest that you go onto Google and just really look at job specs. What we would do for a particular client is look at, I mean, we know most of them now, but look at the job specs because it can vary from company to company, and you really need to cover all of your bases. One company might say PM, one might say portfolio manager, one might say portfolio management. So really within your CV, you need to be covering all your bases and try and mirror the language in your target job spec. And that's why you need so many CVs, because every recruiter writes in a slightly different way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Lots of questions. Great webinar. Thank you for a very insightful presentation. Next week, join us with Peter Surala on European asset-backed securities. I wish you all a good afternoon and look forward to meeting you again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.